Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive. We're exploring the Tibetan Book of the Dead today. It's a guide to navigating those in-between states, the bardos, between life, death, and rebirth. You guys have shared how much you're interested in how these teachings can change our lives right now. So that's what we'll be focusing on as we explore it all today.
It's a great starting point. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's not your average book about, death,
Right.
It's more like a roadmap for consciousness in life and after death.
Yeah, it talks about 6 bardos, right?
6 in total. But today, let's dive into the 3 we experience during death.
Okay.
The bardo of the moment before death, the bardo of dharmata, and then the bardo of becoming. They give us incredible insights into what reality really is and the potential for liberation.
Okay, so let's start with the bardo of the moment before death. What's going on when we feel like we're losing our grip on this physical world?
Well, the book describes it as a pretty fascinating process. The 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, they dissolve back into their source, like our physical reality is slowly unraveling.
So our senses shutting down one by one.
Kind of, but it's actually more than that. The book describes a feeling of heaviness as the earth element dissolves, then a cooling sensation. As water dissolves into fire. And it goes on like that. We're losing our grounding, physically, and experiencing a huge, profound shift in consciousness.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
And what about this luminosity I've heard about in relation to this bardo?
Ah, yes. Luminosity. Super important in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's described as a natural radiance, the essence of, your true nature. And as those veils of ordinary perception drop, it shines through.
But how are we supposed to recognize this luminosity when we're dying? I mean, it sounds kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. It's described as this brilliant light, both terrifying and exhilarating, and it appears as the elements are dissolving. The key is not to shy away from it, embrace it, recognize it as the radiance of your own awareness.
So it's not like something outside of us.
Exactly. Recognizing this luminosity in the bardo of the moment before death is a key to liberation, so they say. But the journey doesn't stop there.
Right.
Next is the bardo of dharmata, and things get really interesting here.
Okay, so what happens in the bardo of dharmata? I'm intrigued.
So this bardo is all about visions. You see peaceful and wrathful deities. But here's the catch. These deities, they're not external beings, they're projections of your own mind.
Hold on, so I'm seeing deities, but they're me.
Think of it as your deepest nature expressing itself, but in these symbolic forms.
Yuck.
The peaceful deities, they embody absolute peacefulness, while the wrathful deities, they symbolize raw, transformative energy.
Yep, even though they might seem scary, they're actually showing me something about myself.
You got it. Recognizing that is essential. To navigate this bardo, the book stresses that fear and attachment, they come up when we think these visions are something outside of us.
I see. So how do we avoid that? Getting caught up in fear and attachment in the bardo of dharmata.
According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's all about recognizing that these visions are projections, not getting lost in how they look. It's cultivating awareness and non-attachment. That's where meditation comes in.
So practicing meditation while we're alive can actually prepare us for navigating the bardos.
Absolutely. Meditation helps us learn how to observe our thoughts and emotions without being carried away by them. And that's crucial in the bardos, where we're hit with these super intense experiences.
Wow, like training for a mental marathon. The more we practice recognizing how fleeting our thoughts and emotions are, the better we'll handle the challenges in the bardo.
Precisely. Speaking of challenges, let's move on to the bardo of becoming. It's all about searching, a longing for a new rebirth. The mental body, it still has all its senses, but it's driven by the winds of karma.
And this is where our past actions really matter.
Yes. The book describes being blown around by these winds of karma and experiencing the effects of what you did in the past. There's a feeling of sadness, pain, even fear of encountering the Lord of Death.
Sounds pretty intense. Can we do anything to influence our rebirth in this bardo?
That's a great question. Karma definitely plays a role, but the book says we can still make conscious choices. If you recognize you're in the bardo and you cultivate positive qualities, it can help you choose a good rebirth and avoid falling into, not so great realms of existence.
So even in this bardo, we're not just along for the ride. We can actively shape our destiny.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for life too, right? The choices we make now, the qualities we cultivate, they all shape our future in this life and beyond.
That's incredible. So we've got these 3 bardos, the moment before death, dharmata, and becoming. We talk about elements dissolving, luminosity, and all those peaceful and wrathful deities. It's a lot.
It is. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just about death, in a morbid way. It's about waking up to what's real,
Right.
to the true nature of reality.
And you're saying that this awakening can happen now, not just in the afterlife.
Absolutely. The practices and insights in the book can help us cultivate awareness, recognize our projections, and ultimately awaken to that luminosity. That's our true nature.
Okay. I want to explore that more. But before we do, let's circle back to those peaceful and wrathful deities for a second. You said they're like different sides of ourselves. Can you tell me more? What do they actually symbolize? And how can understanding them help us every day?
Great question. It gets to the core of how these teachings can transform how we live. Those peaceful deities, with their serene expressions and all their symbolism, they represent those qualities we strive for. Peace, compassion, wisdom.
Right.
They show us the potential for inner stillness and freedom from suffering.
So it's like they're reflecting those qualities that are already within us, maybe just hidden.
Exactly. And seeing them in the Bardo can remind us to cultivate those qualities in our daily lives. And now, those wrathful deities, they might look intimidating with their fierce appearances, but they actually have a powerful message of hope and transformation.
Hope, seriously. I mean, they seem kind of scary.
I get it. Multiple heads, arms, weapons, fierce expressions. But in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they symbolize raw energy, like the untamed energy of reality itself.
So it's not about being afraid of them, but understanding what they represent.
You got it. Think of them as embodying that power, the power to break through limitations, to turn obstacles into opportunities.
Okay.
They're a symbol of that dynamic energy that drives creation and change.
That's an interesting way to think about it. Like they're challenging us to step into our power, to embrace the intensity of life without being overwhelmed by it.
You got it. Understanding this can be so empowering. It lets us see challenges, not as roadblocks, but as chances to grow, to transform. It reminds us that even when things are chaotic and uncertain, there's this powerful energy inside us that can fuel our journey toward awakening.
This is amazing. So by understanding these deities, we're not just prepping for death, we're learning to live more fully right now. It's about tapping into peace, compassion, and wisdom while embracing that raw energy that drives transformation.
Exactly. That's just one example of how the teachings in the Tibetan Book of the Dead can apply to our daily lives. It's not just a guide for the afterlife. It's a manual for awakening to the full potential of, our human experience. We're back, still on our deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's amazing how these ancient teachings, still so relevant today, for life now.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that. Last time we were talking about those peaceful and wrathful deities as like representations of our own potential, right? It's powerful.
Yeah.
But how does recognizing that actually help us, like practically?
It's all about shifting how we see things. Imagine a tough situation, a difficult relationship, or a setback at work. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you could connect with the energy of those wrathful deities.
Like channel their energy
Yeah.
to overcome the obstacle.
It's not about being aggressive, though. It's about tapping into that inner strength, resilience, that power inside you to break through limitations and create positive change.
That's pretty empowering. What about the peaceful deities? How can we connect with their energy, like day to day?
Well, they represent peace, compassion, wisdom, qualities that we all have inside. When you're stressed, feeling overwhelmed, try visualizing a peaceful deity like Tara or Avalokiteshvara.
Okay, so use visualization to cultivate those qualities within us.
Precisely. Peace isn't something we have to find out there.
Right.
It's a state of being, something we can cultivate within.
That reminds me of something we discussed earlier, the importance of meditation, right? To prepare for the bardos. Can you talk more about that? How does meditation actually help cultivate these qualities and deal with the challenges of the bardos?
Think of meditation as a training ground for your mind. It helps us become aware of our thoughts, emotions, sensations, without getting swept away by them.
So instead of being caught in the current, we learn to just watch it flow by.
Great analogy. And this ability to observe without judgment, that's so important in the bardos. Imagine yourself in the Bardo of Dharmata, surrounded by all these visions of peaceful and wrathful deities. If you haven't practiced this awareness through meditation, you're more likely to get caught up in fear or attachment.
Because we're mistaking them for something real, outside of us.
Yes. But if you've trained your mind through meditation, You're more likely to see them for what they are, projections of your own mind. You can observe them without getting hooked, letting them come and go, without disrupting that inner peace.
So it's like building a mental muscle, right? To help us stay grounded even when things get chaotic.
Exactly. And that resilience isn't just good for the bardos. It's valuable for navigating the ups and downs of life.
Totally. The more we practice observing without judgment, the less we overreact to tough situations.
Absolutely. And that's just one way these teachings can transform how we experience life.
Speaking of transforming our experience, I'm curious about something. This idea of Dharmakaya, it's in the book. Can you explain what it is and how it's connected to the bardos?
It's a deep concept. Points to the ultimate nature of reality. Dharmakaya literally means truth body, and it refers to that absolute, unconditioned ground of being. Imagine the ocean, vast and boundless. All the waves come from it, and eventually go back into it.
So it's like the source of everything, the reality that connects us all.
Yes. The Tibetan Book of the Dead suggests that when we die, our individual consciousness, it merges back into this Dharmakaya, like a drop of water going back into the ocean.
Okay, but how does that connect to navigating the bardos?
Well, the bardos, they offer chances to recognize this Dharmakaya, to get a glimpse of reality beyond our limited perceptions. The book says if we recognize that luminosity of our true nature in the bardo of the moment before death, we can achieve liberation.
Wow, that's incredible. But what happens if we don't recognize it? What then?
The journey goes on. Through the other bardos, there are still chances for liberation. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead emphasizes the sooner we recognize our true nature, the sooner we can break free from suffering, that cycle of suffering.
So we're getting multiple chances to wake up, to see through those illusions, to connect with that vastness of our true being.
Exactly. And that's why these teachings are so relevant to us now. Even though we're not actively dying, they offer a guide to wake up to who we truly are, not just in the afterlife, but right here, right now.
This is profound. It's like we're getting the sneak peek into the hidden parts of reality. Exhilarating and a little overwhelming.
I understand. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's a huge, complex system of knowledge. It's natural to feel a bit overwhelmed, but the good thing is you can go at your own pace, focus on what really speaks to you.
That's good to know. I appreciate how we're looking at how to actually apply these teachings instead of getting lost in the complexities of Tibetan Buddhism.
Absolutely. We want to make these teachings accessible, relevant to everyone, no matter their background, their beliefs.
And I think we're doing a great job at that. But I'm still curious about something. How does the Tibetan Book of the Dead talk about karma? It's a word you hear a lot, but I'm not sure I really understand it.
Yeah, it's often misunderstood. People think it's about punishment or reward, but it's more nuanced than that. Karma just means action. It's about cause and effect. Every action creates a ripple effect. It influences our present and our future.
So it's not about some cosmic judge keeping score. It's more about the natural consequences of our choices.
Exactly. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead says, the bardos give us this unique opportunity to actually experience the results of our actions more directly.
What do you mean by experiencing karma in the bardos?
Imagine you're in the bardo of becoming. You're being tossed around by those winds of karma. You might see things, experience things that reflect the choices you made when you were alive. If you were kind, compassionate, you might feel peace, ease. But if you're angry, greedy, you might feel turmoil, unease.
So it's like a mirror, showing us the consequences.
Perfect analogy. That's why the Tibetan Book of the Dead stresses living ethically, cultivating those good qualities. It's not about earning rewards in the afterlife. It's about creating a positive experience for yourself, now and in the future.
Powerful. It reminds us we're not just bystanders. We're actively shaping our destiny. Every choice, every action adds to the tapestry of our lives, in this realm and beyond.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It gives us the power to take responsibility, to make choices that align with our values, to cultivate qualities that lead us to greater peace, happiness, and liberation.
This is so eye-opening. We've covered so much. The bardos, what they're like, the symbolism of those deities, the importance of meditation, karma. It's a lot to process, but so enriching.
It is. And we've barely scratched the surface of this wisdom.
As we've been talking about the bardo of becoming and making conscious choices, something's been on my mind. The mental body having all the senses, even if they weren't working in life, that's both fascinating and a little unsettling.
It is a remarkable concept. It points to the potential for liberation in the bardo. Imagine, even if you were blind or deaf in life, in the bardo of becoming, Your senses are completely there. You can see, hear, smell, taste, touch with incredible clarity. It's beyond our normal experience.
Wow, that's hard to even imagine. But how? What's different about the mental body compared to our physical body?
Well, the mental body isn't held back by the limitations of our physical form. It's subtler, made of energy, consciousness, not flesh and bone.
So it's like our senses are no longer limited by our physical body. We experience the world directly.
Exactly. But this can be both exhilarating and overwhelming. Think about it, being flooded with sights, sounds, and sensations. More intense than anything you experienced in life.
That does sound a little overwhelming. But what's the purpose of having these heightened senses in the Bardo?
The book says they serve a crucial purpose. They allow us to fully perceive the Bardo, to experience the consequences of our actions, more directly, and to make choices that are in line with our deepest desires.
So it's not just about having this intense sensory experience, it's about gaining clarity and making wise choices.
Exactly. And that's where recognizing our projections becomes so important. With all these heightened senses, it's easy to get lost, to think the projections of our mind are actually external realities.
So it's a more intense version of what we experience here, where we project our own thoughts, beliefs, emotions onto the world around us.
Precisely. In the Bardo of becoming, those projections can be even stronger, more convincing. That's why the book tells us to remember our spiritual practices, to recognize these experiences as our own projections, not to cling to them as if they're real, solid things.
It's like we're getting a chance to see through the illusions of our own minds, to break free from that cycle of suffering that's driven by clinging to these projections.
Exactly. And that's the ultimate goal of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to help us wake up to the truth of who we are, to realize that luminosity, that's our true nature, and to break free from that cycle of birth and death.
I'm seeing the bigger picture now. I have to admit, though, I'm still curious about something. Those specific instructions in the book for navigating the Bardo of becoming. Can you give us some examples?
Of course. The book has a lot of practical advice. Here are a few things to remember. First, don't cling to any of the experiences, no matter how good or how scary. They're all projections of your own mind. Clinging just keeps you trapped in that cycle of suffering.
So it's like walking through a dream, knowing it's not real.
Exactly. And second, cultivate those positive qualities. Compassion, generosity, wisdom. They'll help you in this life, and they'll create good karma to support you in the Bardo.
It's like packing for a long trip. You want to make sure you have what you need.
Precisely. And finally, remember your spiritual practices, visualizations, mantras, the things you've cultivated in life. They can be like anchors in those storms of the Bardo to keep you grounded in awareness and clarity.
This is so powerful. Like we're being given tools to navigate the unknown.
That's the beauty of it. It's not just theory. It's a practical guide for transforming our experience of life.
As we have been talking about the Bardo of becoming and making conscious choices, I keep thinking about karma. People get it wrong,
Yeah.
Thinking it's some kind of cosmic punishment. But you're explaining it in a way that's much deeper than that.
You're right. Karma isn't about punishment or reward. It's cause and effect. Our actions have consequences for ourselves and for others.
Like planting a seed of kindness. You'll likely get kindness back. But if you plant anger, you'll probably experience the results of that anger.
Perfect analogy. The Bardo teachings show us how far-reaching the consequences of our actions can be. Our choices create ripples that go beyond this life. They shape our future rebirths.
Wow, that makes me want to be more mindful, knowing my actions have such a big impact.
And that's one of the gifts of this book. It helps us see how everything's connected. Our choices matter, not just for us, but for all of life.
I'm feeling inspired, like we can be conscious creators, shaping our destiny with wisdom and compassion.
Exactly. That's the essence of the Bardo teachings. It's not just about death. It's about living a more awakened and meaningful life.
Welcome back. It's amazing how the Tibetan Book of the Dead gives us this, rich perspective on life, death, and everything.
It really does. And as we're wrapping up, it's important to remember this isn't just theory,
Right.
It's a guide for the challenges of life, in this life and beyond.
We've talked about recognizing projections, meditating to be more aware, and understanding karma. All super insightful. But I'm curious, how do these teachings help us with, the fact that we're all going to die?
That's a big question. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead addresses it with clarity and compassion. Remember, it's not trying to scare you. It's about empowering us to face death consciously, courageously.
Okay. But how? How do we face death with courage when it's so unknown?
The book has instructions for preparing for death, for navigating the bardos, for choosing a good rebirth. But the most important preparation, it's cultivating awareness and wisdom now, while we're alive.
So it's about how we live, not just what we do in our final moments.
Exactly. The more awareness, compassion, and wisdom we have in our everyday life, the better we'll handle those transitions of death and rebirth.
That makes sense. It's like packing for a trip. You want to be prepared.
Perfect analogy. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead gives us that packing list, guiding us to develop the qualities that will help us, not just in this life, but in the bardos and beyond.
Speaking of the bardos, you mentioned the Lord of Death.
Yeah.
In the bardo of becoming. That's a pretty intense image. How are we supposed to, relate to that in the bardo?
Yeah, the Lord of Death is often shown as this fierce being, wrathful. But it's symbolic. It's not meant to be feared. It's a manifestation of our own karma, reflecting the choices we've made.
So it's not judging us for our mistakes.
No, not at all. It's more like a mirror, showing us the results of our actions, a chance to see ourselves clearly, to acknowledge the impact we've had, to learn.
Wow. That's powerful. Like we're getting a chance to take responsibility, see how our actions affect things, and make up for any harm we've caused.
Exactly. And this encounter with the Lord of Death, it can be a huge turning point. It can push us to live a better life, be more compassionate, make choices that align with our best selves.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone deep into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the bardos, their challenges, the importance of luminosity, the role of the deities. It's a lot to absorb, but also so enriching.
It is. And as we wrap up, I want to emphasize one thing. The Tibetan Book of the Dead says liberation is possible. It's not just for a select few. It's not something we have to wait for until after death. It's available to us right now, if we're willing to cultivate awareness, compassion, wisdom.
That's a beautiful message, and I think it really captures what we've been exploring. The Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just about the afterlife. It's about living a more awakened and meaningful life right now.
Well said. And remember, this journey of awakening, it never really ends. It's not a destination. It's a path. We walk it moment by moment, with each breath, each choice.
So as we conclude our deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we invite you to keep exploring. Think about what you've learned. See how it can guide you on your own path of awakening. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep shining your light.